Hello and welcome to the Women Writers Festival, the world's largest traveling festival focused on women writing across genres, whether they're writing in literature, whether they're writing non-fiction, whether they're writing about sci-fi, short form, long form, screenplays, what have you. The Women Writers Fest in its seventh year has been traveling across the world, bringing you different and very powerful writings of women. After all, we do need to put more and more women writers on our shelves and get to know more and more stories through a gendered lens. Today, my guest is somebody who has been very controversial and at the same time, someone who has literally gone to a dark hole to pen down this book, The Devil's Daughter. Vidhi Mukherjee is the daughter of Indrani Mukerjea and Peter Mukherjee, both of who have been known in the media world as media barons. But in 2015, Indrani Mukerjee was accused of murder of her own daughter, Sheena Bora. And into the case was pulled Peter Mukherjee and Indrani's ex-husband, as well as everybody in the family. This was a very difficult period for a young person at 17, Vidhi Mukherjee, the daughter of Indrani and the stepdaughter of Peter Mukherjee, who then finally got the courage after a deep mental health crisis and a violent relationship with her mother to jot down what she went through. How did she overcome a situation where she was exposed to this situation where her mother was talked about as a murderer and her father was also in jail? How was it to have both set of parents in jail? What did she go through? The mental health crisis that she went through, as any young person would. And so, all of these deep incidents have led her to write this book, which we are going to be discussing today. How has it changed this young woman and what lies ahead for her? Vidhi, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you so much, Shaili. It's really a pleasure to be here.
So, first off, why did you choose to call your book The Devil's Daughter? Given that your mom has been accused of murder, but the case hasn't sort of been called out at the point that you went into writing your book.
Yeah, so actually, the words devil's daughter, when they come together, most people kind of assume that I'm talking about a specific person or someone. But actually, like when this name kind of came up in conversation, the reason why it resonated with me so much is because I didn't my first thoughts didn't go to any specific person. It's like a metaphor to me, and it's truly how I felt I was looked at by many people across India, the media, the law, and it's ultimately how I actually started viewing my own self. So these two words, when they are put together, it's kind of so deep and beautiful for me, and it's a title that has so many meanings. It's open to interpretation by the reader.
Yeah. But how deeply difficult or complex has it been for you to write this book? Perhaps a reflection of, what prompted you to say, okay, fine, I'm going to put this down.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't so. I think I started writing this book last year, and it had already been 5 years since all of this has happened. So I was already on the path doing majority of the work. I'd kind of already understood a lot about myself, a lot about my family members, a lot about people in general. So I had that step up to already start writing it. When I started writing it, actually, I didn't really know whether I was gonna release it to the world. So it started off as more of a cathartic kind of release for me. And then what prompted me to kind of say that, okay, I need to put this out in the world is that when I was flipping back through all my like really tough and painful memories, especially kind of revisiting panic attacks, and I couldn't help but think how many other people must be facing these kind of issues. I mean, yeah, we all have different issues on the surface level, but anxiety is the same, depression is the same, suicidal thoughts are pretty much the same, and we all, I think, need the same kind of healing underneath. So I wanted to just be kind of a hope for people that they might be able to use this as a guide or something that might be able to help them of how I got through it all.
Having said that, I just wanted to ask you, at the time, you said it's been a long time. At the time this incident took place, it was 2015. And if one was to look at this entire journey, at that point, you were what, 17 years old?
Just turned.
How did you, yeah, 17?
Yeah, yeah.
Right. So at the point, what was going on in your mind when your mom was first arrested, and then all of this played out in the papers? How have you captured that feeling of that time?
So actually, just the day my mom got arrested, the day after was my 18th birthday. And I was actually due to go to university like a couple of weeks after. So, and this is something I don't really understand. But when this whole news broke out, I didn't know what to do. I didn't know what to feel. So like I think there was this kind of defense mechanism like in within me that just prompted me to completely shut off, from everything. So when I actually heard the news and when I saw the world's murder and when I actually saw my mom getting taken away from me, I couldn't I couldn't feel anything because it's not something I chose to, but I couldn't feel anything. I didn't cry for the first 2 months that this happened. So essentially, I just kind of when I immediately left for London after that, and I pretended that none of this was actually happening back home. And I was like that for the next 2 years. I just went to this whole of like this route of escaping anything connected to any of that. So whether it was my feelings, whether it was, like even accepting that this is going on back home, I didn't want to like feel any of it. So it was a really strange time, but I mean, it all come crashing down like 2 years later.
Yeah. So you've said that you had to use psychotherapy to want to write and get back, to even want to pour, what you went through. What was that experience like?
So the psychotherapy I did actually, it was completely by myself. Obviously throughout the years, I've kind of given it a shot, seeing different therapists, and one of them really did help me just to kind of organize my thoughts. And but essentially, when I started writing my book, I was just kind of revisiting so many different aspects of my life that I completely shut out. I forgot that they even existed, and they were so deep within me and so hurtful, essentially. So I kind of came across this concept called shadow work, which is you're working completely by yourself. And it's a really, really, really intrusive and tough process to go by. And I was kind of doing this with myself for like 4 months. And it's where you are kind of accessing and confronting the darkest kind of parts of yourself, your shadow self, your anxieties, your repressed parts, and you kind of see glimpses of these when you're arguing with someone, because most of the time we only present what we want other people to see. We truly don't even know ourselves.
Yeah.
And when I was in this phase of doing shadow work, all of it comes out, like all of your so-called flaws, your negative kind of behavior, it all comes out, and it really kind of gives a shock to the system. You don't want to accept any of these, but it it kind of made me transform in a way that I did this work by myself. And once you kind of come out of it, there's a depth of understanding that you have about yourself that you never did before. So after that, I never kind of had a panic attack after that. I'm kind of so in control of my emotions now, with so much more to go. Like I by no means am I okay. There's just so much more work to do. But yeah, I think doing the work with myself was the best kind of healing that I did so far.
Yeah. So let me just go back in time a little bit, and that's also probably what's reflected in your book. Is around the part that your mom Indrani Mukherjee introduced her other daughter Sheena as her sister, and then all of this sort of slowly unraveled for you. Um, when you wrote this book, what were those pain points like? Because you were reliving some of this really hurtful moments.
Yeah, of course. I mean, it wasn't easy. I think there were so many times that I just had to take a break, and I had to kind of like readjust and because it was the first time in like 6 years, maybe like in 10, 12 years, that I was actually going through specific memory points, whether it was my mom's, uh, childhood, whether it was mine, whether it was Sheena's. I was kind of going through so many different emotions and trying to feel her emotions at the same time, that I just had to kind of take a couple of steps back. Sometimes I had to take days off writing, and it was really like messing with me mentally, that like there were days I didn't kind of get out of bed, literally, because it was so tough to accept that this is happening to me, and this actually did happen in my past, and this happened to someone else. It wasn't easy at all, but once you accept it, once I kind of confronted it, then only was I able to kind of tell myself that, okay, I have to feel certain things. I mean, I still haven't. There are so many things I still haven't accepted. I know it's at the back of my mind. I know these are things that I have to kind of confront and
Like
just
what have you not accepted?
accepted, as in, like, I haven't, for example, I still haven't confronted the whole topic about like my sister Sheena. I still haven't gone there. I because I'm so afraid mentally to kind of like, I know I'm strong enough to kind of confront it, but it's such a heavy weight that I'm still kind of, I constantly push it off. I still, in a way, when the moment thoughts about her come into my head, I kind of push them out because I'm not ready to face them yet. So there is just like, there's so many things like that. That's why, like,
What was
whatever.
your relationship with her like?
It was amazing. I mean, we were like, we literally were like sisters. We just kind of understood each other, even though I was super young, and this was like years and years ago. uh there was there was a connection that you can't, it's unspoken connection. It was a sisterly unspoken connection, and so many things make sense now. But yeah, and again, these are things that I just haven't really confronted or accepted, that this has happened and she's actually not in my life anymore. It's easier to kind of shut it out than have it staring at me right in front of my face.
Tell me something. One aspect of this entire, situation was the fact that the person accused of murder here was your mom, right? This is supposed to be the most sacred relationships, often the daughter and the mom relationship. Um, Tell us a little bit about how you have accepted or not that part.
Yeah, I mean, like, see, mother-daughter relationships, they're kind of almost like stereotypical in a way that it's so complex, it's so nuanced, especially with me and my mom. Uh, Through the years, it's not really been easy for us, because I wasn't really like the easiest kid either, because her kind of stress back then probably reflected on me, and I became a very kind of stubborn, arrogant, and difficult child, where anything she said, basically, I would want to do the opposite of. And that that relationship only got complicated from then on, because I think me and her had very different visions generally in life. I think she wanted me to be a certain way, I wanted to be a certain way, and it was quite complicated. And now, I think when this whole thing broke out, for the first 3 years, I didn't really talk to her. I kind of cut off communication with her, and I chose not to understand her, even though I had the opportunity, even though she was willing to kind of talk to me. I chose not to understand her because I was just so afraid, and more than anything, I was just in my own head. And now, I've realized that she didn't really have anyone. She didn't have anyone as a kid. She didn't have anyone now, and only me. So I've kind of taken it upon myself to just empathize with her, no matter what it is. People ask me, people say, why, how can you empathize with someone like this? At the end of the day, she's my mother. And I think a lot of people kind of confuse the terms empathy and sympathy, is what I realized. I mean, I didn't really even know the full meaning of empathy until last year. It's taken a lot of self inner work and just understanding the word to kind of understand how important empathizing is. And just understanding a lot about my mom's past really kind of made me open the doors and connect with her again, because she's kind of had one of the toughest life as a kid. I mean, I recently found she had Sheena when she was 15 years old. She had her first kid when she was 15, and not consensually. So when that happens, it kind of, what do you do? It makes you into a stone, right? You don't know what's going to happen. So right now there are a lot of things for me that make sense about who she is today because of her past. And I just feel like I wouldn't be able to live with myself if I didn't at least give her a chance or try and understand her.
So at one point, you've said that this was a big sense of betrayal that your mom didn't share with you what was going on. Would you say, having sort of, perhaps written the book and revisited your mother and what were her triggers and thoughts, would you say you've forgiven her for what has transpired these last 7 years?
Yeah, so forgiveness is something that's really interesting that I've learned is, yeah, so I have forgiven her. But I've not forgotten. This is a constant, it's a gradual process. For me, forgiveness is almost, it's like close to godliness. When you forgive someone, you're essentially letting go of the past. And forgiving her did more for me than it did for her. That's how I see it. Because I was carrying around such a big burden trying to constantly understand what's happening. And I had to kind of accept everything first to forgive her, and I can only kind of continue my relationship with her where I've essentially told her, listen, I forgive you for everything, but like it's still a complicated relationship. I mean, there are a lot of things that we have to go through for that complete cycle where I can just be easily with her, being like, hey, yeah, this is our relationship. I mean, there's a lot of like stuff that she needs to kind of do for me, in terms of just give me the truth. And it's a long process. It's not easy at all. But yeah, in simple terms, I have forgiven her, but I've not forgotten.
So the turbulent nature of your relationship with your mom seemed to have reflected eventually on the relationship between her and your dad. What was your relationship with your father when all of this was playing out?
Amazing. I mean, we've only gotten stronger, if not, he's, I think it's very evident. I think everyone knows this, that he's the most important person in my life, essentially. Like, he's what kept me alive through this whole thing, even though we were not able to be there physically with each other. His letters are something that kind of gave me the strength. I gave him his strength. It was a relationship that literally started when I was 3 years old, coming out of the airport. And I don't think any of us, both of us, didn't expect, even my mom didn't expect how close my father and me would get. And it's amazing.
So, like when you started writing this book, did you feel that there would be a sense of shame as people read this and the kind of judgments people may pass at you for example, forgiving your mom or perhaps even writing the book?
I was past all of that. I mean, like, I've faced so much judgment the past 4 years that this book was like, it didn't matter to me, Of course, I mean, one thing I've realized is there's always going to be people that try and put you down, no matter how much good in the world that you're doing. And it's just, for me, I tune those people out completely. I mean, and also, like, it's something like, it's their own conjecture, like, even after I released this book, there were so many people that came out to me and apologized to me for judging me, and that I tend to look at the more positive things in life. Like, it doesn't affect me if there's a couple of people judging me for getting back in touch with my mom or forgiving her, because, like, it doesn't matter to me. It's their own opinion, and it's for them to kind of understand. But yeah, like, I'm okay with it. I welcome it. It's fine.
Yeah. So we spoke about this briefly at the start, but have you been able to come out of your mental health crisis that you went through during this? And perhaps there are remnants of it, I'm sure. But just to get a sense of how have you navigated your own life to get it back on the fold for yourself?
I mean, it's a process. Like, a lot of people assume and think that I'm very okay in terms of mental health, much better than I was, obviously, the past few years. But I think mental health is something that's very prevalent throughout your entire life. And I think it's something that we ought to be very aware of, especially in a place like India where it's still quite a taboo topic. And, we're all very ashamed to kind of talk about the fact that we're not okay. And I've honestly accepted that it's okay not to be okay. In fact, it's normal. So for me, I I'm not okay by any means yet. There are still so many kind of aspects that I have to confront. There are so many trigger points that still are there for me. But one thing I've realized that it's a journey that you're with yourself. The biggest advice I can give is to constantly keep learning more about yourself as you can, because you have to learn about your strengths and weaknesses. You can't let anyone else do that for you. A lot of there's this big misconception that I realize when people are going through a lot. The common advice is, oh, talk to someone, talk to your friend, talk to a therapist. Yeah, and all in good, that's okay. But I think you need to talk to yourself more importantly. The person that got me out of this is myself. And it's a work in progress, always. It's going to be a work in progress till I'm probably 50 years old.
Yeah. What's the one thing that you would say to people who are navigating such difficult times, particularly with the set of people they love the most, their own parents?
So I would say, just in times like these, one has to persevere. And there is, like, I know it feels like there's no light at the end of the tunnel. Trust me, I felt like this for like 6 years, but there is a light at the end of the tunnel, and there are people rooting for you. You might feel so alone, but there are people rooting for you. Your parents especially are rooting for you. The things with our parents is, like, at times we're best friends and at times we just don't understand each other at all. But I would just say persevere and follow your intuition. Follow your intuition, because trust me, you know best for yourself.
More power to you, Vidhi, for at least writing this book and sort of putting yourself out there, which is tremendous, for showing that much courage, and sharing the story, which I guess in many ways people will resonate with. As you said, a lot of people came back and said that they regret having judged you. All the best for this book. And thanks so much for talking to us here at the Women Writers Fest.
Thank you so much. It was such a great honor